1 year of war in Ukraine has revealed a few things. Ukraine proved its resilience. Russia's shifting justifications and unclear objectives are on display. But beyond the combatants, the war shows how the world is realigning. Europe has gotten closer to the US. Its decades of good relations with Russia, and to a certain extent China, are behind it. The US versus Russia, capitalism versus communism, Uncle Sam versus the Red Army, the democratic West versus the authoritarian East. These movie tropes have been done to death, but it seems like they've been given a new lifeline, much like NATO. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has turned the clock back by decades. Tensions between the nuclear powers haven't been this high since the end of the Cold War. And like in the days of the Cold War, the world seems to be clearly divided. The Western bloc of the US and Europe is aligned against Russia and China, a rehash of global fault lines that existed after the Second World War. The more things change, the more they seem to stay the same. Let's start with the West. Uncle Sam is back to playing the role of Big Brother. It's firmly in charge of the West's defense policy. The fear of a revanchist Russia has made Europe fall in line. They feel that if Russia wins in Ukraine, there's no guarantee that it will stop. And their best bet is to let the US bolster their defenses. The existence of NATO, which was called into question for years, including by former US President Donald Trump, seems paramount. Now, Sweden and Finland want to join. More nations may follow suit. Then there's Russia. The war in Ukraine has alienated Europe. So it has turned to its old red ally, China. It has also picked up a friend along the way, Iran. It makes sense for Iran to choose the Russian side, considering the West's hostility to the regime. There's also North Korea, another old, if somewhat erratic, ally. Reports say Moscow is buying ammunition covertly from Pyongyang. Of course, this puts South Korea and Japan firmly in the US bloc. Japan wants to lead the world in fighting Russian aggression. It has promised $5.5 billion in aid to Ukraine. That's not much compared to the American aid, but it signals the global fault lines are widening. And it's not just Russia that America's eastern allies are worried about. A belligerent China, one that's aggressively claiming disputed islands and threatening to invade Taiwan, is raising alarms. The Philippines is back in the American fold after the chaotic Duterte years. Manila is providing bases for American military use. Then there's Australia, teaming up with the US in both the Quad and AUKUS groupings. All of these moves are to counter Chinese influence in the Indo-Pacific. For these countries, Russia is the secondary threat. Which speaks to the change in the world order since the end of the Cold War. Till the Soviet Union existed, it was the senior partner in the Eastern Bloc. Now, China is holding the strings. Beijing is supporting Moscow's war by buying oil and gas and sending it equipment that can be used in the war. It hasn't sent lethal arms to Moscow yet, but the West warns that may happen soon. One thing that may stop China from doing so are the business risks. China has forged good economic ties with Europe. It's the world's manufacturing hub. If it aligns too closely with Russia, it could be cut off from global markets. A return to the old world order could severely limit China's economic clout. Another change in the world order is the alignment of former Soviet states. When the USSR fell, many of these states gained independence. Baltic states like Estonia, Lithuania, and Latvia. Caucasian states like Georgia and Armenia. It was known as the fall of the Iron Curtain. And these countries are worried that Russia could target them if it wins in Ukraine. Some of the nations have come together as the Bucharest Nine. They seek assurances that they won't be left to fend for themselves.
Geopolitical energy situation.
What about the rest of the world? Are they content to watch from a distance? Perhaps a return of the non-aligned movement? Not exactly. Most nations have their own agendas. The OPEC nations have taken a neutral stance, but agreed to limit oil production. This benefits Russia, but also the nations themselves, as they reap the benefits of higher oil prices. South Africa and Brazil, key members of the BRICS grouping with Russia and China, are being pragmatic. South Africa is hosting the Russian and Chinese navies for a joint drill. Brazil's president, Lula da Silva, has called for peace, but also spoken to Putin about strategic Russia-Brazil relations. Both countries are looking after their strategic interests. Then, of course, there's India, a historical ally for Moscow, Washington's partner in the Indo-Pacific to counter China. a rising voice in geopolitics with its actions firmly aligned to its strategic interests. India too has called for peace, but it has also bought discounted Russian oil despite Western sanctions on Moscow. Yet it remains a critical ally for the West to counter China. No longer are countries satisfied with a uni or bipolar world. Those who are stronger now don't want to be pawns in the great power games. India, Brazil, South Africa, the Gulf states, even Turkey, they're all emerging as separate actors, and they're driving the change, leading to a multipolar world.